I noticed how my words shaped people's behaviours, some other people who worked with me, how it could make them grow, how it could make them feel differently about themselves. And I saw the power of words. The one thing I kept saying was, I want my mind to be quiet. I just want to feel peaceful again. And I couldn't for years. The brain cannot be easily fooled. No matter how much faking of Y that you do, the brain will default to the X. Visualizing a success in business, in leadership, it's really buying into that more than thinking, can I do this? Your vision is like your North Star. And just put it into very succinct terms. What is it that I want to see in the future? If you think about anything that you remember well, it was forged in emotion. If anybody's doing affirmations, to do them with an emotional charge. If we can distinguish between who we are at our core and the things that we sometimes do as human beings, the better we will be and the brighter the world will be around us.
Hey, welcome to the Leaders Podcast with me, Laura MacDonald, the leadership coach and mentor. Come with me as I explore the elements of leadership that give leaders like you the power and confidence to make the impact you know you can. I'll be sharing my own experiences, top tips and insights, and talking to some very special guests to share their thoughts and leadership experiences on mindset, influence, change and growth. So let's get right to it. In today's episode, I'm speaking with the delightful Amanda O'Rourke, speaker and InnerCalm coach to high achievers in business and leadership. Welcome to the Leaders Podcast, Amanda.
Hello, Laura. It's really nice to be here.
No worries. I'm glad you agreed to come. I think it was going to be an interesting conversation today. Before we begin, I ask all of my guests a question to share with listeners how they can serve themselves for the purpose of serving others better. So with that in mind, how have you served yourself in the last 24 hours?
Good question. Wow. I got lots of sleep. Sleep is a real big thing for me. I did something I really love yesterday, did some gardening. So that was really productive. I had a really productive day the day before, but yesterday I took it more gently. And this morning I meditated, which is something that I do every day just to keep myself centered, grounded, and supporting myself with gratitude as well.
How do you go about meditation? What does meditation mean to you?
So I've done it in different ways along the years, actually. I think for me, I like guided meditation because my brain chatters a lot. So I need that distraction of thought to be guided. So I use Insight Timer, which is an app. Now, that's what I currently do. Previously, I'd used downloads that I'd gathered from different places. But I think for me, meditation is simply quietening the mind. It's not about telling your brain to shut up, telling your mind to be quiet. Tried that, it's impossible. And even, I read a really brilliant book called I May Be Wrong, which the author was a monk, and he said it's impossible to stop the brain from talking. So that's not the aim of meditation. The aim of meditation is to slow your brain waves down, to slow your heart rate down, and just to bring you into a centered space of calm and contemplation. And then curiously, things do crop up in my meditation. I have insights. And so it's kind of almost a conflict to what you think you would get from meditation. You imagine it's going to be quiet and nothing happens, but actually it can be quite a creative space. So I think that's something that I've learned along the way of my meditation practice.
Which I think is so important these days, because we so rarely get that quiet space, that quiet time to actually really think things through. The monks that you mentioned, like the one that wrote that book you read, I admire them so much, because in a world full of chaos, so many people have so many purposes, and it could include things like, reaching out a message to the public or whatever, but monks in particular have such a focus on, let's just be calm, and it's all about achieving their own inner peace before they reach out to the world. They put themselves first, which I think is quite
Extraordinary, isn't it?
extraordinary. Yeah.
But what I would like to add to that is that the book, if anybody's interested in reading it, it's by a man called Bjorn Nathiko Lindblad. He's actually deceased now, which is a real shame. And I cried when I found out he died because I thought we're never going to be able to read anything as beautiful as this book again. But it was very funny as well. There was a lot of humor in it. And I think people might think, oh, meditation is one of these things where it's just sitting, being calm, trying to attain inner peace. It's also about tapping into other aspects like play and humor and joy. It's not just about one aspect. So I would encourage anybody who's thinking about meditating to be aware of that as well.
We don't get to have that chance to have fun and have a laugh and find the humor in the smallest things. Again, another sector I admired greatly, I think, is comedians, because the greatest comedians out there pick out the smallest things that are so insignificant to all of us, and they manage to find a way to turn it into something that makes hundreds, thousands, millions of people laugh.
Well, I have a thing when I'm trying to sort of look at something that might have happened to me, and I always say to myself, will I laugh at this later? And very often the answer is yes. There's not much that you can't see the funny side to. And I would even include some of the grimmest, some of the darkest moments in my life where we found humor, because it's a coping mechanism as well. It's a letting out of emotion, and laughter can be such a good way of expressing ourselves in a way that we can't do otherwise.
What made you the person you are today? How did you become a coach that focuses on inner calm?
Probably by being the opposite. That's another good question. I think for me, my journey has been a bit sort of circuitous. Now I work with corporate people, corporate leaders. I was in corporate myself originally, but then I moved into having my own business. And it was during that time that I saw how my own behavior was hampering me, but also it was not having a good effect on the people who work for me either. And I noticed how my words shaped people's behaviors, some other people who worked with me, how it could make them grow, how it could make them feel differently about themselves. I saw the power of words, and it made me explore coaching as an option for a career. But I also realized in the period as well that by me being calmer in myself, I was able to tap into something more than just being a good person. I should say in that period, whilst I was still working in corporate, my mum died. And what that led me to was this great journey of exploration, of self-discovery. What is this life all about? What's the point, And so that made me really examine who I was as a person. And some of it I didn't like what I saw. And some of those behaviors played out still beyond those explorative years. And it is like this journey that we go on. It's so incredible how you can really be so blind to what's going on for you. There's a great saying, I love it. It's you can't see the label when you're inside the jar. It's so true. You need that mirror. You need somebody to almost step up and say, Amanda, you're being an idiot. Or, I've had worse. But I mean, those are the things where you can react so many different ways to those kind of comments. For me, initially you're hurt, you're wounded. But if you have got some degree of self-awareness, you will take the time to look at what's been said and see it beyond the cruel jibe and think, what's the truth in that? What is there for me to learn from that comment? Where's my lesson? And all those small incidents led me to realize that for me, inner peace is the most important and most valuable thing on the planet for me. With inner peace, you can cope with everything. And so it's a question of that being my quest every day. I want that inner peace, because when my mum died, the one thing I kept saying was, I want my mind to be quiet. I just want to feel peaceful again. And I couldn't for years. And so it's about knowing how to tap into that on a daily basis, irrespective of what's going on. It's personal power over circumstantial power, is what I call it. So
Mm.
when you've got personal power, you have got power over what is going on around you in terms of it, your reaction to it. When it's circumstantial power, you're letting everything that's external driving your behaviors, your reactions, your thinking.
Mm. Yeah. It's quite a challenge that so many of us face, isn't it? We look at the ultimate outcome of our, reactions or anything like that. And all we see is like from the reaction forward. We don't necessarily see what's all been building up to that and how
Mm.
that's been caused, or what we ignored that caused that reaction, or what we've suppressed that caused that reaction. We don't always work through all of our emotions that allows us to be able to have that extra control over how
That's
we
so
respond.
true. And I think the other thing that I need to mention as well is that it gives you, when you have got that sense of peace for yourself, you tend to have an understanding of why other people react the way they do as well. So, for example, if you see somebody kicking off in a shop or whatever, rather than think, oh, God, that's awfully rude and whatever your reaction might be, I now say to myself, what must they be going through or have gone through to react that way? Because we don't show up like that as babies. So our life experience shapes who we are, and it's around understanding and compassion that we will forge a new way of being with each other.
You speak to high achievers, go getters, and plate spinners. Is it all about keeping as many plates spinning as we can?
I would say no. I would say if you are aiming for a peaceful existence, then simplicity is the best route. When I talk about plate spinners, it's because it's something that I used to use a lot in my own business. It was like I'm always plate spinning. I've got loads of things on the go, and I think you fall into this trap of thinking that that's who you are. You kind of your identity shifts to being that plate spinner, that person who's got to do all of the things, and it's a narrative which a lot of high achievers have is I've got to do it all. Um, the best thing to do is find other people to spin the plates for you.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as. And the difficulty is having that mindset of it has to be me is very difficult to unpack. You can do it. I've done it, but there's so many things wrapped up in that, like perfectionism and control. Hello, I like control. It's kind of those sort of things which you have to admit to yourself, and then it's about taking that leap of faith and delegating.
Absolutely. And that is a massive change that so many leaders have to make at some point. I feel like even if you've got a team of leaders above you who've completely cracked that, I
Mm,
think sometimes the outward impression to a new leader still very much comes across as, well, they've got everything under their control. So
mm,
I have to do that. And I suppose I sort of imagine it to be one of these conversations that needs to be had sooner in somebody's leadership journey at the beginning, to say, no, your job is to support other people so other people can do the job.
absolutely. And I think it's a good point you make. I remember when I was running my franchise business, it was a cleaning business, and for about 18 months I was going out with the teams cleaning, and the CEO at the time of the franchisor business, they said to me, if you're doing that, you're not using your management skills to the best of your ability. And wow, I was like a sucker punch. I was like, my first reaction, well, you don't understand. And this common kind of sort of thing, well, nobody understands me, nobody really gets it. But I did what I said earlier, is I pondered on that and thought about it, and I thought, there's got to be some lesson in that for me here, not beyond the actual obvious words. And I realized she was right. And as soon as you can actually see the truth in what somebody says to you, it becomes less of an insult and more of a learning point. So I did something different as a result. And things shifted from that point on. It was incredible how I'd been leaning into the belief that I needed to be active in the role of organizing the cleaning and so on, driving myself into like a real direct route to burnout, but not being able to shift from that gear. So I think it's so important to acknowledge when things are getting too much for you, and everybody knows when they're in that direction. They know they need to change, they just don't know how. And that's where I step in usually, whether it's in business or within leadership. It's that needing to change but not sure to know what to do.
Mm. And that's often, yeah, what I find with my clients as well is they're not sure like where to go from here, which is often why they end up asking for my help.
Mm,
Um, to sort of gain that direction, sometimes, like you said, you need that person who can just mirror back to you
mm.
what you've said or what you're appearing as or anything along those lines, but also open your mind to the possibility that like there's other perspectives that you haven't considered yet,
Yes.
and still let you go down the path, encourage you to go down the path of what's right for you, but do it in a way that widens that perspective so you've actually got the whole picture rather than just the picture that you see.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah, I think that's so important to realize that actually if you're in a position to say, actually, I know that this isn't good for me, I know that I'm in a bad place, I know that I'm heading down the wrong path, if you don't know how to change it, that's okay, just go and ask for help.
Mm. And I think that's again really tough for some people to do. Particularly high achievers, particularly people who are used to getting there on their own. We did a management exercise once. It was one of these games where they give you a scenario, and you are this scenario we were given. We were stranded in the desert, and their plane had crashed, and we were all stranded, and we had to devise a technique of what we would do and our strategy going forward. We had items that we could select that we would keep and we would discard. We did it individually and then we did it as a group. The whole basis of this was to show that we work better as a team. And of course, I I disproved it all because the when we totted up our scores, I was better off on my own. And the guy said, I've never seen that before. And of course, that didn't help me because it just fed into my internal narrative that I'm better off doing everything my own on myself. You've got to find a way to challenge that directive that you have for yourself. So what I would say to anybody listening is if you are struggling right now and not knowing where to turn, is ask yourself, what is my part in this? What am I doing in this role that I'm in that's that's fostering this behavior, that's fostering this belief that I haven't got anywhere to go, I don't know what to do. And that will help them, but ask for help is the most honest answer to that question, I think, in terms of what can you do. There's no shame in it. I think that's the thing, is that a lot of people feel that they shouldn't have to, that they should be able to cope on their own. And it's just not true.
It's interesting you mentioned that exercise. I do a similar one with some of my leadership training groups,
Mm,
and it's yeah, similar sort of thing. You're shipwrecked. You're all like on an island by yourselves with all this stuff to use. You can only take 6 items with you on the rescue boat. What are you going to do? Every group's come up with a different combination of what they're going to take with them. The thing that always ends up being the lesson, I suppose, for the way I do that exercise is, well, did anybody decide on the goal? Did anybody decide what the purpose is of what you're doing? Is it survival? Is it to be rescued? Is it so that one person can succeed but 5 other people are going to perish along the way? Like what's the goal? Like how is it that you want to get to the end of this thing? And that kind of feeds in, I suppose, to what we're talking about today, which is vision. Is when you have a scenario like that, if the group hasn't agreed on a vision, it's kind of not gonna go anywhere. You will always find that whatever combination you pick isn't necessarily going to work out because everybody's got a different goal in mind. Leaders across the world will attest to the fact that when the leader is calm, especially in times of crisis or stress, the team will remain calm too. I speak from experience in the hospitality and education and training sectors that really is the case. It really is. But we all have our limits, right? Even the calmest of people will have their off days.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's very true. And I think with experience, you can hone that behavioral trait of calmness. And we see it in parenting. What we don't realize is when we're parents, we're leaders. we're leading and we're role modeling to our children our behaviors. And so it's kind of practice with that can really help us recreate that time and time again, that calmness, that way of being. But I think one of the things that I found as time went on is that the opposite, to get angry, was really, it was purposeful in that it was getting the emotion out of my body. And I always would say that that is a good thing. Do it securely, do it without harming anyone else, but get it out of your system if you feel angry or annoyed at something. But after that, when it comes to being in front of people and showcasing how, you're going to handle the situation, then it's very different. Then you need to get that anger under control and be different. So a good example I can give you is in my cleaning business. One day we had a flood, which was caused by a couple of the girls that were working for me. They'd left a tap on. It was really accidental, but of course, it led to the flats below this flat that we were cleaning to get flooded, which is not very nice. And it was just before Christmas. So the circumstances couldn't have been much worse. However, the the client, the customer was really understanding. She was very helpful. She could see it was a complete accident, which was really gracious of her. It was the people below that were having more of an issue with it, of course. However, when the girls came into the office to speak to me about it after the incident, we'd all been there together and they came back after the end of the day. They said, "Amanda, why are you so calm?" And I said, "Well, what's the point of me getting angry? There's really nothing to be angry about. Yes, there was something that was done wrong, but you didn't do it deliberately. And what would that achieve? How would that make you feel if I got very angry with you?" And they could all see the reasoning. And I hope it showed them how I would want them to be if they were then in charge of a similar incident.
Mm.
So I think I just think it's a superpower. If you can be calm in those sort of incidents, it's like, it is just so much more easy to deal with the circumstances themselves.
Mm. I used to have a lot of frustrations, I think, with simple things like menu changes. We would often have dishes come back on the menu year after year in a certain
Mm,
season that just were not good sellers. And as the person responsible for the stock and the sales and the customers and everything else, it was frustrating to see these things come back on the menu because I was just like, they don't sell. Nobody likes them. Like, why are we doing it? But I had to find a way to turn that into some sort of opportunity with my
mm,
team. And the only way I could do that was by being calm. So
mm.
my thing was always to read the menu changes, because I got the email directly because of my position. So I would always read the menu changes alone. Then I'd have my moment in the office, and then I would go downstairs and go, right, guys, we've got a fantastic opportunity to figure out how this could be better for everybody. And eventually the team would get on board. But it took me taking that 5 minutes by myself, knowing that it was, for me, it was better to let it out
Yes.
to get to that calm place than it was to just simply suppress it. Another good trick, which is an advantage of working in a kitchen in hospitality, is that you've got a lovely walk-in freezer. So if you need to cool down, you literally can.
I love that.
Yeah, go in the freezer, shut the door behind you, have a good scream, no one can hear you, and, and come out again. It was just little ways. It's about using what's around you, isn't it? To just go, right, okay, let's work through whatever you're feeling to get to that calm place that you need to be in.
And I think that's such a good way to do it. Like, so I used to scream out loud as well. And it is so important that we don't suppress that emotion of anger, because it just is an emotion. And that's one thing I would like to communicate very strongly in this, is that our emotions, we've classified them as positive and negative, and the negative ones we've deliberately tried to bottle and suppress. And I just think that's such a bad thing to do, because emotions are just signposts. They're just telling you how far away from where you want to be that you are. And the frustration you felt, the menus, and the initial frustration I might have felt that we've got an insurance claim on our hands. There's nothing you can do with that in the moment apart from reacting to it. But then, like you say, it becomes a choice after that because the incident is gone, it's past. And we then can choose to react continually to it in the vein of anger, or we can calm ourselves down and go in the freezer, um, and cool off and then say, okay, which behavior is now going to serve me best?
I attended an interesting online event recently about the dark side of leadership, what's usually seen as the different negative emotions, actions, etc., reactions that
Mm,
all leaders will display at some point of their leadership, um, and how you can make yourself aware of them, counteract them, and possibly prevent them in some situations. Challenging negative thinking is important,
mm.
but being aware of, let's call it, this dark side of leadership is actually really important too, right? It's important for you to recognize when I've had these types of situations, this is how I respond, and that's okay. I just need to be aware of who and where it's appropriate to do it in front of, and how I can manage it. That webinar really enlightened me as to how much we ignore those things, how much we ignore those reactions and responses, and that dark side of leadership that we're likely
I
to
think
display.
it's so important. If you're working towards self-acceptance, then you have to embrace your dark side. You
Mm.
have to acknowledge that you are capable of XYZ behavior. And I know that whilst the majority of the time my state of being is peaceful and calm and joyous and in awe and all of the good stuff, I'm quite capable of getting angry and being not very nice person to be around sometimes. But I know that's who I am and it's part of me, and it's a behavior I'm not particularly wanting to showcase all the time, but it is something that's there. And I love her, that part of me, as much as I love the good part of me. I say good as in our terminology of good and bad, because I know that's who I am. And whilst I'll work every day to make my behavior better, I'm human,
Mm.
and I'm not some sort of robot that's only on one kind of programming. So I think if there's one thing that I would say to listeners right now is that embrace that part of you that you don't particularly like, because then you'll find your quest for inner peace will come much quicker.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Self-love and self-acceptance is so important.
You mentioned the word perfection earlier. That's
Mm,
that's a huge thing, isn't it, that stops people from being real with themselves about the whole picture of their leadership. Is this need to appear perfect, so they will only publicly recognize the positive sides, the good sides, all the things that they do well. For example, when if I'm training a particular qualification or something like that, an ILM program is a good example of that. There's lots of points during an ILM program where you're asked to self-assess in some way on some particular subject. And the volume of learners that I've had come back to me over the years with answers that are all about what they do well and nothing else.
mm.
It's kind of like, okay, so what aren't you doing so well? What have you not had a chance to practice yet? What is it that you would like to be better at? What is it that your employees are saying that they need from you that perhaps they've not seen yet? All of these things that need to come into the whole picture of leadership rather than just, well, this is what I do well and this is how good I am and that's how brilliant I am at that. It's great that you're great at all those things. Those are exactly the things that are going to help you improve everything else, but you need to recognize what everything else is before you can work on it. You've got to see the whole picture of leadership. How does vision play a role in InnerCalm then?
So I think I've used different metaphors along the years, but I think my favorite one at the moment is your vision is like your North Star. So you can use it in many different guises. For me, vision is about what it is that I want. And it can be in business, it can be in the way that I lead, it can be in the way that I coach. It's about really getting clear. And this is why I like the North Star metaphor, because it's the clarity, it's the sharpness, the beauty, and the brilliance of it. To try and isolate and just put it into very succinct terms. What is it that I want to see in the future from what I'm doing now? And so the vision can be something you want, it could be something you want to achieve, it could be something that you want to be, how you want to be different. These are things that you can put into a vision, and use visualization to achieve it.
It's kind of similar to what people say about success. You've got to have your own definition of success. Perhaps it's the case
Correct.
that you also need your own definition of calm.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I think for me, I think being in a calm, the inner calm thing came to me when I was grieving from my mom, but it didn't become a sentence or a phrase for a very long time after that. So sometimes you've got to sit with it, with what you want, and it doesn't necessarily have to be crafted into a phrase. I think it's more important that you have an idea in your head first of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And for that, it can be, like I say, in business, it can be that you want your sales to increase by 20% or something like that. For a visual of who you want to be, you could just say, I want to be calmer. I want more inner peace in my life. I want more joy. I want more freedom, whatever it is.
You talk about not just vision, but visualization as well. I'm wondering
Mhm.
what's your take on the whole fake it till you make it thing.
Hmm. I think the only difficulty, I mean, I've used that phrase myself in the past, but the only difficulty I have with that is that the brain cannot be easily fooled. So if you have a very strong belief that you are X, then no matter how much faking of Y that you do, the brain will default to the X, and you will feel the dissonance of that. So you won't be able to reconcile that in a way that your body will respond well to.
Mm.
So what I would say is, if I was in a position where I was trying to be Y and I'm X, I would look at what is in Y that I like and how can I replicate that, rather than just trying to fake all of it. I think there is an element of fakery when it comes to visualization, is that you can trick the brain into believing something is happening, but there are certain steps you have to take to do that. But when it comes to things like affirmations, for example, a lot of people are like, they love affirmations. I am is a very powerful sentence of itself. However, you can't say, I am, um, I'm a role model, or no, I am a supermodel. This is me, I'm talking, because clearly I'm not. But it's actually about, what will my brain accept as true? So I could say, I'm a hand model. I've got nice hands. I did have. But it's that kind of thing. So it's what your brain will accept, but also it's what you can imagine as well. So I'm saying I'm not a supermodel, but if I accept the proposition that anything is possible and I want to be a supermodel, I don't. But if I did, I could visualize that right now, and I could get to a point where my brain would be coaxed into believing that would be possible. And then it's about what then happens in my brain, the chemistry in my brain, that helps motivate me to make those steps toward that goal.
Mm. I think there's a huge impact that can be made with affirmations. I think that example of I am is a powerful statement in itself, was an excellent point to make. I saw a video a few years ago about a little kid who has affirmations that he repeats on the way to school, which firstly
Lovely.
was the most adorable thing I'd ever seen. But but secondly, his affirmations included things like I am strong, I am capable, I can do anything, I'm smart. And I just thought, what a wonderful thing to start at that age. Because although he probably doesn't understand the full meaning of all of that, the fact that he's got two parents who have told him all of those things because that's what they see in him
Yes.
is a starting point, and he trusts those people. And I found that was an excellent way to start my own little affirmations, was look at what do the people I trust say about me and use that as evidence. Because actually, if there's a correlation, I mean, my friendship group are a bit of an anomaly because not many of them actually know each other.
Oh,
so,
wow. Okay.
so if they do, it's a happening occurrence. They happen to have worked in the same place with me, or things like that. But it's not many of my friends actually know each other that well. So if they're all saying the same thing, it's not because they've come together in a room and gone, what can we say about Laura? It's because they genuinely think that. They're not basing it off what the other friends think. They're
Yes.
basing it off what they think. So if I've got that little bit of starting point of, if my friends all said that I was trustworthy, for example, I can say I am trustworthy. And I have that initial little bit of belief because I trust the people that said it, that that is in fact true. And eventually I can work my way towards believing that. But it's, yeah, you can't just
And I
fake
think
it, can you?
no, but it's interesting you're saying about things that you already are aware of, that you already are. So it's about, those are the things that your friends can tell you, and how wonderful to have friends like that that would validate you in such a lovely way. What I would say is that it's those things that we're not sure that we are yet, that are the I ams, that we can really help get us to that position. So one thing I would say with affirmations, the secret sauce, if you like, is emotion. Because if you think about anything that you remember well, it was forged in emotion. Your brain will remember things that were high, when you're in a high emotional state. So that can be things to keep you safe. So if you were, stepped out in front of a car, you're never going to do that again. Or if you had a wonderful wedding and it was so joyous, and you'll remember that because it's such an emotional state. So the same with affirmations, you need to craft a state of emotion that will generate energy in the brain to start forging new connections. So I would definitely recommend, if anybody's doing affirmations, to do them with an emotional charge. Easiest way to do that, visually or audibly, or both. So that's how I've done it in the past, is with a little video, with a piece of music that meant something to me, with photographs that meant something to me, with affirmations that I wanted to embed into my brain. And that is the quickest, it's not the quickest way to craft it, but that is the simplest way to bypass the brain's, that's not true. It's such a clever way to do it. And I'll give you a good example of that. I had my very first video I crafted, and I put, I am a brilliant businesswoman. And it was a picture of me just out on a night out with some of the ladies that worked for me. The next year, it was replaced with a picture of me winning an award from the franchisor. So I then became that person that I wanted to be. I became good at what I did, and I won 5 awards in total after that. So it was kind of, for me, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. But I would never have done it, I don't think, without the music and the pictures that meant something to me. So if anybody is looking at affirmations right now and thinking, oh well, they're not working, play some music while you're saying it. Play some music that's going to lift you up, that's going to elevate your emotion to the point where you'll start to believe it. Visualization is so very clever. There was a study done a few years ago in the University of Chicago where they had a set of basketball players. I know it's quite famous, so you might have already known this one, Laura, but it's worth repeating because they sectioned these players off into 3 groups. And the first group, they asked them all at the beginning to shoot free throw hoops and to see how many scores they would convert. But what they did was they then sectioned out the groups. So the first group practiced for an hour every day for I think it was for 2 weeks. Then the second group just visualized shooting, and then the third group did nothing. And what was astounding, I thought, was that the first group showed an increase of 24% in terms of their shooting ability. But the visualization group, who didn't do any shooting practice but just visualized it, 23%. There was 1% difference in marker between them. So I just think, what if you combine the two? And a very good example of that is there's a footballer called Matt Letizia who doesn't play anymore, but he I think he had about 7 or 8 England caps, and he had the best, if I think he might still have the best penalty conversion record. I think he took 39 penalties in his Premiership career, and he converted 37 of them. And he said openly, the reason he feels that he did so well is that he always visualized beforehand the crowd going nuts when he scored
Mm.
before he took the shot, which I think is worth thinking about, because if you believe before you start you're going to succeed, then the chances are that that will play out. So again, that goes to the vision, visualizing a success in business, in leadership. It's really buying into that more than thinking, can I do this?
Yeah, and it's building up your evidence base as well. A more recent football example actually was Cristiano Ronaldo. Someone filmed him while he was preparing to take a penalty, and he was doing like self-talk basically. He was just talking at himself, just going, cross the barrier the same as always. Scoring goals is normal for you.
Mm,
And it was, you
mm.
could see it in his face. It was 100% belief. This is normal for you. So the more evidence he's got as time goes on that this is normal for him to score goals, the more he's able to visualize, well, yeah, this is going to turn out the same as all the others. You know,
I love that affirmation. This is normal for me.
mm,
So powerful, isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the thing that you see with somebody like Cristiano Ronaldo is that the recovery afterwards as well is he's very much a person who will take the times where he doesn't convert, and he will sort of recalculate and come back. So that's the thing as well in leadership we have to acknowledge, is that sometimes things won't go to plan. We can visualize, but sometimes circumstances are beyond our control, and we can't always get the outcome we want. And it's how we react to that. Again, it goes back to our behavior and what do we want to showcase.
The secret battle leaders everywhere fight daily is imposter syndrome, meaning we put our success down to sheer luck rather than the belief that we achieved it because we deserved it or because we did it through legitimate efforts or actions. How might having a vision for ourselves help tackle that and reduce the impact imposter syndrome has on us?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier about having this belief of who we are. I think it's about exploring that, exploring our worthiness, because that's where imposter syndrome is rooted. It's in this belief that I'm not enough. And so I think if you can craft a vision of being enough and working towards that belief, I think that can definitely help. But I do believe that you have to start at the root, because like I said, is no matter how much you tell yourself something, the reason we're in that, what they call it is an imposter syndrome loop, is you don't believe you're enough. So you do what all high achievers or people who want to prove themselves do, and you go out and get evidence that you are enough. So you'll get a degree, or you'll get a master's degree or PhD, and you go on and on, because you need more and more evidence, because that underlying narrative is still saying, nah, you're still not good enough. And unfortunately, people have experiences where people around them don't validate them. So they'll do something and parents, God bless them, won't acknowledge it, or it's not what they want for their child. So they don't support it. So it, it completely impacts that belief of whatever I do, it's not good enough. What you'd have to do, I think, is find a way to kind of overcome or override that belief of I'm not good enough. And interestingly, I read a book recently which was talking about the way the brain works and saying that you it's much easier to form another belief that will exhaust an existing belief than it is to try and unpack the existing belief. So rather than try and counter a belief with I'm not good enough with I am good enough, which we've heard sort of time and time again, especially from a lot of coaches, you're better off getting another belief which will overarch that, which will then become your most preponderant belief, if you like, and the other one will then die away. So one of the things that I would say is with the affirmations we were talking about, it's getting something that is going to help you believe that you are good enough without saying I am good enough. So it's finding something that you can say to yourself, that you can work towards, that you can use in your vision of who you want to be. So it could be something like, I am a great leader. I am a brilliant businesswoman. I am a great student. I am a brilliant parent. I am a wonderful wife, a wonderful husband. It, not I am good enough. It's can see the difference and how it might make you feel. I know it certainly makes me feel different inside when I say those things. It's finding that works for you,
Mm.
that creates that emotion, that charge that you need to craft that new neural pathway in your brain.
I think the other thing I've certainly found with learners, with clients, with employees over the years is getting them to a place where they realize they are not the only person that feels this way.
Mm,
I was teaching a group a couple of years ago. There was about 20 people in the room. Some people were slightly higher up the chain, some people were slightly lower down the chain. And I said, the one thing I want you to find is common ground.
mm,
And by the end of the first session, I asked the whole group, what's the one thing that you feel all of you share? And all 20 people had said that we feel like we're imposters.
mm,
And I was like, and the thing is, some of you are worried that you'll be found out by some of the people in this room.
mm.
We sort of put ourselves in this isolating shell where we kind of go, no, I can't talk to anybody about that. I can't ask for help on that. Nobody feels the same way I do. All these leaders around me, they've got it. But actually, there's a lot of apparently high performers out there that are in fact not high performers at all. They're
Mm.
pushing themselves to be high performers just now on the basis that they feel like that's how they have to be to cover this thing up and cover the imposter syndrome up and not be found out and not be discovered
Well,
for what they fear they are.
it's interesting, isn't it? Because like the definition of imposter syndrome is that somebody feels like an imposter despite the evidence to the contrary.
Hmm.
So they're not an imposter, but they believe they are.
Yeah.
And that's the distinction. So it's about, and it's interesting you say that all those people felt it, because one of the things I always refer to is that another level, another devil. You won't ever shake off imposter syndrome. It's a natural reaction to a new circumstance. So, you know, I went through it when I became a parent. I was like, what am I doing? Somebody is going to find out that I'm not very good at this. But it's natural. It's very natural. And I think the one thing that we can all embrace is the fact that we're all going through it if we're in that leadership role to a certain extent, to a degree of whatever it is that we're trying to achieve. I think it's important to look at that, and instead of trying to say, right, I want rid of this, I want rid of this feeling, look at what it is saying about you. And Adam Grant, who's an occupational psychologist who wrote the book Think Again, talks about it in the book. And he says that if you have imposter syndrome, it shows that you care. And I think that's so important. Wouldn't you rather be with a leader that cares than somebody who's blathering their way through their role as a leader? That person who cares about what they do, and it can be destructive because it can lead to burnout, it can lead you to overworking and all of the negative things. But the one thing that he found in his studies, Adam Grant said, was that they did a better job as a result. The research showed that people who reported that they had imposter syndrome did a better job as a result. And I just think you've got to look at that as well as the impact it has on you as a person. So one of the things I say to my clients when they say, oh, I feel like an imposter, I'm like, yeah, so do I. And it's normal, but how can you see it as a good thing as well as feeling negatively about it?
But once, as you say, you're able to acknowledge this, I feel like a total imposter, and
Mm,
then you've got other people's validation that that's okay, it's a normal feeling, you
yeah.
know, that you can also address it and change things and change the way that you respond to it or recognize when it's cropping up for you. That's the point where high performance starts to come in. That's real high performance. Because to me, high performance isn't just about, output for the business or the organization that you work in or high output for your team. It's also about how you feel about that. To me, a high performing team member is also one who feels successful in themselves by their own definition, who feels good about how they've done it, who feels that the way they're doing things is sustainable. It's about how great do I feel about the fact that I'm able to do all of this and know where my limits are and know what works for me and know when I'm reaching overwhelm and go, stop, you know,
Yeah. I
and
think something you
that's
said earlier,
amazing.
though, is relevant as well about asking for help, though, because I think one of the things is that having people around you to reflect back what really is going on, because you can wind yourself down into a feeling of not good enough and I'm not doing the best I can. Somebody else who's right alongside you can be like, "You're doing an amazing job. What are you talking about?" It's about reality. You have to have that reality check. And sometimes that has to come from somebody external that isn't, sort of with you day to day necessarily, but can see the good that you're creating and what you're doing in that role that you're in. So again, anybody who's listening, struggling, reach out for help. Even if it's friends or family that you can rely on their judgment, just to make yourself feel that there is some truth in the belief in who you are as a person and as a leader.
What's your vision going forward?
Good question. So my vision for my life is peace, happiness, and joy, and so much more. For my business, it's really about me helping others to see and share their own light so that we can make the world a brighter place. I think the more that people acknowledge their goodness and how they can see their own potential and what they can give and how they can serve, the better the world will be. I think that's for me part of what I feel that I'm here to do is to help people be better. And I don't mean that people aren't good because I intrinsically believe there's light in every one of us. I believe at our core we are all good. It's our behavior that gets in the way.
Mm.
And I think if we can distinguish between who we are at our core and the things that we sometimes do as human beings, the better we will be and the brighter the world will be around us.
That's a wonderful vision. It's been fantastic to chat with you today, Amanda. Vision is the centerpiece of any leader's success as it creates the purpose for everything else you do. You've shared some intriguing insights today that I'm sure will support leaders listening out there to think about their own vision and how they can get there. If people wanted to connect with you, learn more about what you do, just chat to you, where can they find you?
So they can find me easily on LinkedIn, Amanda O'Rourke. And I've got a website called happycoach.co.uk, which says it all really.
Absolutely. And you can find those links in the description for this episode. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me today. I think the wonderful thing about talking to you has been this calmness you exhibit, and you've really showcased how vision and visualization can support leaders to be successful by their own definition. I hope you've enjoyed your guest experience today.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, real pleasure.
It's been an insightful and empowering conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, everyone.